When I came to California about 16 years ago, I was doing 50-50 research, and now it's 90% research and 10% GI, to the point that the research kind of made me ask questions. The dealing with pharmaceutical companies made me ask questions. When I saw medications, 25 years ago we used to do clinical trials on antibiotics, and antibiotics was for everything. Acne, antibiotics. Crohn's, antibiotics. So everybody was like on the same trend, because pharmaceutical companies tend to be like copycatters, One company's doing PPIs, every company's doing PPIs. So then 20 years ago was the PPI trend. Everybody needed to get on that. And then the biologics, also about 20 years ago, Remicade was my first study at University of Florida. And then Remicade became Humira, became Stelara, and became available for every trial, again, in every pharmaceutical company, and every conditions. And now we're in the microbiome business, which, to be polite, the SH.T business.
One dot.
One dot, yeah, so SH.T business. And when I start seeing pharmaceutical companies dealing with microbes and everything, and we don't really understand anything about the microbiome world, I decided to send my samples to the laboratories that existed. Ubiome, which you've seen made the headlines.
That was the big one. They got raided by the feds.
Yeah, they're actually going bankrupt now. Biome, another one. Anyways, a bunch of other labs that were kind of, I don't know, no real clinical data, no real, research behind it, and I was finding out that I had different results for my patients before and after stool transplant. So I do fecal transplant as a GI doctor. So when clinical trials and I'm also known in the world of research as the queen of C. diff. So any clinical trials, yes, so the little C. diff Barbie is actually...
You love C. diff?
We love talking about it. We hate C. diff.
No, well, okay, and C. diff, and actually C. diff, that poor little bug, is misunderstood.
Yeah.
Because we're actually coming out in October at American College of Castro, and I'm presenting the poster that shows that all of us have C. diff.
Wow.
And so, it's misunderstood. The question is it misunderstood because, are we getting C. diff because we're eating that hamburger that was infested with a lot of antibiotics? Or are we getting C. diff because of antibiotics we gave the patients? So it's misunderstood. October 28th, I'll be in more liberty to talk about my research. But basically, there's going to be a trilogy on C. diff, which is, the first article is meaningful or meaningless data. The second article is C. diff, innocent bystander or villain. And then the third article is the truth about C. diff. So I'm actually doing the trilogy of C. diff. And everybody's going to understand C. diff a little bit better. Yes, but we're going to start understanding C. diff a little bit better, because I think we need to understand the microbiome a little bit better. Pharmaceutical companies need to understand the microbiomes. Human beings going to buy their foods at Costco, Trader Joe, need to understand the microbiome, because you're being fed stuff that is affecting your microbiome. We are what we eat, and what we digest. So when I realized that when I was sending my stool specimens to the world of the sequencing world, I like to call it the genetic sequencing, I was getting different results. So typical Sabine fashion, I went to this conference, and I went to the top guy that was involved with the whole microbiome research. And I said, I'd like to collaborate. And he said, well, we've already looked at the microbiome. You don't need to get involved. And, my line always as a woman is, yeah, well, watch me. So I opened a genetic sequencing laboratory that basically, and I hired the scientist that used to work at Novartis, and the chief scientific officer that's behind a marker for lung cancer, and that have been behind the BRCA1 gene, etc. And I said to them, look, I'm not interested in the funding. I'm not interested in money. I'm not interested in fame. I'm interested in understanding the microbiome. And we're going to do research the way it needs to be done. And basically they said, okay, we're on board. And then all of a sudden people started coming into my team. And then Progenibiome was created. Ubiome is gone under, but Progenibiome is doing it the right way. So we created a clinical trial. We convinced it with the IRB, and I actually picked the hardest IRB to approve, which is New England IRB, because they're very, very ethical. They look at every dot on the I. Well, there's, you have to kind of like pick who is going to like be your toughest IRB, who's going to give you a hard time. Anytime, when a monitor gives you a hard time in research, they're usually on the ball.
We can talk about that too.
Well, we can talk about that.
A little side story, you want one?
Well,
Chris,
okay.
you know this one too.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that's basically Progenibiome was created.
Yeah. And I have another, and actually for the sites, any sites that are here, because Dr. Hazan's now a sponsor as well. So she's a site, Ventura Clinical Trials. She's also a sponsor for Progenibiome, and then we're her CRO. She's giving studies out, left and right, to sites. So if you want to study, and you have a GI, or do you even need a GI?
You don't need a GI. You do need a doctor that understands the consenting process, and you do need a doctor that understands genetics, and doctors that are willing to be part of this, absolutely welcome aboard. We're trying to get as many doctors, and we're trying to go global because we're doing the 23andMe of the gut essentially. So we want to understand the microbiome at every race, at every disease, and create the biggest encyclopedia. This is not a one-woman job. This is not a one-man job. This is global involvement. The same way that ICH GCP is globalization of research, and we're all bonded together. I want to create the same thing with the microbiome, because this is 1 trillion bugs. We are at mile 1 of 300 trillion bugs to understand. So we need to be all together looking at it carefully. We need to work together. This is not something that's sponsored by venture capitalists or, love to have everybody involved. However, it needs to be done the right way. It needs to be done as a clinical trial. It needs to be oversight by the Department of Health. We're working with the Department of Health because we're a CLIA lab. It needs to be worked with the IRBs and then eventually with the FDA. This is something that's complex. So as many doctors that want to be part of it, we'll put you on our website, we'll educate you, etc., to get involved.
And so let's talk a little bit about how you transitioned, because you didn't leave Ventura Clinical Trials. You're still full-time there. You also have a private practice full-time, and you're doing this, which you bootstrap. So how does one even do that? And this is for the sites out there that are trying to recruit PIs or are trying to nurture their more research-naive PIs. Because a lot of these doctors that I talk to, they have all these ideas, but then they don't understand the research, they don't understand the fundamentals. So do you think owning a site for however many years you did help? Or, yeah?
So, I don't do GI as much as I used to, so I've had to cut down. But to answer your question, how do I do it all? I have, I'm a hurricane. So, I just have to, my husband always says, if you want Sabine to do anything, you have to challenge her. So I've been challenged, so I'm taking on the challenge. So now, as far as, what was your other question?
He wants to get it. Chris wants to get into the monitor from hell story.
Yeah, good, bad, and right.
Get the mic, man. We have 2 mics.
You have a bad one, right?
So,
Explain, because sites are dealing with this.
Yes.
This is not it's funny, but it's not funny when it's going on when the coordinators are crying.
Yes.
And then you've got to deal with it as the site director. Gladly, thankfully, it's just a few. I don't know the sites here, how many experiences you've had with bad monitors, but it's not that many, right? It's like less than 10%. Right?
I would agree, yes.
So how did you deal with
Okay,
it?
so how many PIs are in the room? Any PIs?
Just
So one. Okay. And then how many coordinators? So 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. So you know it's very difficult because, they're trying to give you advice and you've been doing coordinating, you've been a coordinator. For example, my coordinators have been with me like 7 to 8 years on the average. I've been, in practice for so many years as a PI that what happened is it's very easy for me to like train coordinators, and then I always tell them, look, you stay with me 3 years and then I ship you off to the monitor world where you can be monitors, but you're gonna have to start learning, they call it Hazen University in my site. So we train them, we mold them to the best coordinator, and then they're off to the world. If they don't have a bachelor's degree, they cannot be monitors, so they tend to stay with me and they're really loyal.
So any of your CRCs come back to haunt you?
No, actually, it's pretty funny because they don't admit that they work for me because they want to come back, but then there's that, I can't really be your monitor. So I've not seen one of my CRCs as a monitor because the companies are pretty, knowledgeable of preferential, and no, they actually, all my ex-CRCs love me. So they're still back, and yeah, they go to Argentina on a job to monitor, and then they bring me back a bottle of wine. So life is tough, I know. So anyways, I don't expect much. Although when they do have a private jet, I do expect a ride on.
So how do you deal with the mean monitor? I think that's what Chris was asking.
So the mean monitor, I have a discussion with them because I'm very protective of my staff. Some of my coordinators that have been with me for 8 years, they know more than the monitor. So when I have a monitor, and actually this happened to me, I was at a meeting on a C. diff study, and the monitor was at this meeting as a coordinator, okay? Then this coordinator got raised to be a monitor because she had a bachelor's degree, and the study was like over a year. So all of a sudden, this coordinator that I met at the meeting is now my monitor, right? But she started off as the same as my coordinator. So she comes in, and now she has a whole bunch of attitudes and start giving problems to my coordinator. Well, my coordinator is more experienced on C. diff than anybody. So when you start criticizing my coordinator, you gotta have, you've got to have data to come back to me that's actually valid. Because if you say to me, if you try to, create chaos and you tell her everything's fine, and then you write 100 queries after you leave, that's not okay. I mean, no coordinator wants to see the monitor and say, oh yeah, everything's great, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you get a letter a week later that says, oh, by the way, you have 100 issues to deal with. And then it puts a lot of pressure on the coordinator because a lot of these issues are like, well, talking about vitals, the PI didn't put not clinically significant. Well, that's not really a query. It's just talk to the doctor the day. So I always give, as a PI, 2 hours to my monitors because I say, look, you're going to have issues, you're going to have problems. Rather than writing a 20-page document, why don't you just give me the charts that have issues? Let's deal with them. You have 2 hours. 2 hours is plenty for like 4 charts.
That's very unusual for a PI to do that, at least in my experience.
And that would save them a lot of headaches because the microphone is like...
Yeah.
That would save them a lot of headaches because what happens is when they come back and the 100 queries are not taken care of because the coordinator is super busy getting patients, then what happens is they come back to me 3 months later and they come back with an auditor because it's like, well, Dr. Hazan, you've got so many patients, and then those patients, you didn't answer the queries on time. Well, the coordinator is super busy managing the patients, following SAEs, AEs, recruiting, right? Because which is more important, following the patient or answering the queries? I mean, I understand the rules of, and I love when monitors call and they go, well, EDC needs to be entered within 48 hours. Yes, but your study is super intense and takes 4 days to just monitor the patient. So we didn't get a chance to do the EDC in 48 hours. So it needs to be a team. So what do I do with hard monitors? I have a discussion with them when to get that relationship going. Because it's teamwork, right? I mean, and I will tell you, sometimes it's easier for me to have the FDA in my office than to deal with monitors and auditors. And in fact, the point that, we were audited recently because of a, monitor that was just, over the top. And I just couldn't have those discussions with her. And I said, and they imposed, well, we need to audit your site, and we need 2 days, 2 monitors, 2 auditors, 2 days for 1 chart. I'm like, 2 days, 2 auditors for 1 chart? What are you doing, dissecting the chart? I mean, it's like 20 pages, right? I mean, like, are you going to China and reviewing the chart and coming back? So that was not acceptable to me. And basically, I'm like, no, I will give you 2 days, 1 day, 2 people, and you're going to be dealing with me because this is the way I do business or research. And so you have to kind of set the boundaries. You have to kind of say, because ultimately, it is easier. If there's a problem in my site, I am the first one to call the FDA. If I believe that I have a problem, I'm going to call the FDA and say, look, I think I have a problem with my site. So I'm not afraid of the FDA because I do things by the book, okay? If I make a mistake, if there's problems, well, there's corrective actions. That's why they're called corrective actions. But there's no reason to bully a coordinator or to make her feel like she's a criminal when she's trying to do a job and she's doing the hardest job. I'm a big supporter of the coordinators because they are at the bottom taking all the SH.T. Yeah, so I'm a big pusher of like support the people that are doing the work. I'm the person that's like, if I see a person dumping mud, I'm going to respect that person because they're doing a job I don't want to do. The strawberry picker in the field, I respect that person and I'll bring them lemonade because I feel that they're doing a job I don't want to do, right? So you got to respect the person that's handling all the crap, pardon my language, like your plumber.
Does that answer your question, Chris?
It does.
And your GI doctor.
And the GI, so talk to us a little bit about the microbiome, and then can you talk about stool fecal transplant?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when clinical trials so my way of curing C. diff, it has always been flagyl, vancomycin, fidaxomicin, and then, when those 3 methods don't work in the world of pharmaceutical that's available and in the guidelines, then I have 2 choices. I either do fecal transplant for my patients, or I opt to put them in a clinical trial. And so my patients come to me anyways because I do fecal transplant. However, sometimes it's not that easy to find the perfect donor, to get the donor, to tell the patient, look, I'm going to be using stools from a donor that you don't know, from, Boston. So we have to kind of like figure out other options for the patients. And so clinical trials is where I put these patients. And so it's a discussion. I like to have a different menu, if you could say, as a GI doctor to offer my patients, because basically medicine is an art, right? And you start off with a blank canvas and then you decide what colors you're going to put on the canvas. I like to have a whole array of colors. So I don't like to just say, well, you know what, I'm just going to give vancomycin because the company decided to pay for my lecture, 2 years ago. It doesn't work like that. So I have the whole array of colors, and I basically tell to my patients, well, what do you want on your canvas? Do you want the medication that's already approved? Do you want a clinical trial where you actually get followed closely and this is what's been shown on the clinical trial and it shows good promise, but we don't know anything and we don't know if you're going to get placebo? Or do you want fecal transplant, which runs a risk of the colonoscopy, runs a risk of what we don't know, the unknown? And so that's how I kind of have done my practice. That's why I open clinical trials in Ventura to begin with, because my patients who had Crohn's disease and didn't want to be on biologics, I needed to have other options for them. So there's herb studies we've done with Nestle. There's been enzymes that we did with Korea. So there's other options. It's always good as a physician to have as many options as possible, because, listen, we don't know it all. In fact, I always say we know 1%, and then 99% is all the stuff we don't know. So, you know, it's best to be cautious and have as many callers that's available as possible when practicing medicine, and that's what I think.
I have a question about the C. diff patients. I know these are people that have the chronic C. diff issue, or is it like
Reoccurrent C. diff.
post-admission,
So-
post-discharge, sorry.
So C. diff comes to me with different, from different people. So it's either the person that went to the dentist, got one antibiotic, and then developed C. diff, and they come to me. And for those people, typically, you know, antibiotics like vancomycin will do the trick on the first time. However, you know, a majority of these patients come back with reoccurrent C. diff. So when they come back with 2-3 reoccurrences of C. diff, that's when we have to consider either the clinical trial route or the fecal transplant route. We have a great clinical trial right now that's going on, and actually they even are using one-timers, meaning patients that have had one C. diff episode, and it's actually breast milk, believe it or not. So they believe that breast milk would actually help patients with C. diff. So we have that available. On the other side, we have another company that figured out that when you kill C. diff, really you're killing all the clostridiums around C. diff, and maybe we should just fine-tune the fecal transplant in a way, in a capsule. In other words, instead of putting the whole stool in a capsule, just put just the clostridiums. And so that's their study, and that's also available on a clinical trial. And then of course we have fecal transplants, and then fecal transplant could be with using university donor stools that have been tested, or I use familial donors that I test in my office.
That's why you say it's someone you know. Oftentimes they prefer someone they know, so it must be family.
100%, yeah. And I always joke, because I always do husband and wife, because when you start looking at the microbiome, and the amazing thing about having entered into this venture is I sequenced my own stools, my husband, my daughter, and my two daughters, and come to find out it's like a flag, right? It's like the American flag. It's very similar, even with the husband and the wife. Like, I'm very similar to my husband, yet he was born in New York, I was born in Morocco, you know, I mean, like different microbes, but because we've been mingling for 26 years, we're starting to resemble each other, sadly. And you know, you see that with couples that have been like 25 years. So when I pick a husband and a wife as the donor, so I picked a wife who was super sharp. Her husband had C. diff, he was demented and had Alzheimer's. And I gave the stools of the wife to the husband because he had recurrent C. diff. And lo and behold, he came back into my clinic 3 months later, and he said, "Doctor, I'm remembering things. I'm remembering my daughter's birthday." And then I got curious, because I had a mini mental status on this patient because he had Alzheimer's. And I repeated them. See, this is the beauty of being in clinical trials, is you do so many clinical trials. And to answer your question, I would have never known about a mini mental status until I did an Alzheimer's study. I would have never known a suicidal score until I did a psoriasis study. You know, I mean, there's so many things you learn doing clinical trials, and people always ask me, "But you're a GI doctor, why are you doing psoriasis study?" And I would say, well, a biologic is a biologic, whether it's given for Crohn's or whether it's given for psoriasis. I'm actually probably better at fixing these patients with a biologic than the dermatologist, because I'm familiar with the biologics from Crohn's disease, because it came to GI first. right? So those are the things that you kind of like realize when you do clinical trials. Anyway, so to get back to my patient with fecal transplant, you know, we did, and again, this is one case, this is not a majority, we have no data, so I don't want anybody thinking like, oh, you could do fecal transplant for Alzheimer's. But the fact is, when I did his mini mental status, I realized that his score went up to 26. And then even the neurologist picked up that it went from 20 to 26. So a little bit about mini mental status. You know, when you're 20, you're severe, you know, Alzheimer's. When you go up to 26, you're approaching the normal. And then 6 months later, he went up to 29. So now this was a beautiful case to me that demonstrated the power of the gut flora and what we don't know. But again, this is one case. We need 1,000 cases, right? On the same thing, on the same reasoning, I did another husband and wife team with C. diff. And the wife had normal platelets, the husband had low platelets. I didn't realize platelets had anything to do with fecal transplant, right? So I'm analyzing him, he's perfect, he doesn't have HIV, he doesn't have hepatitis C, his stools are perfect, he's the perfect donor. Except for the low platelets, where I'm like, nothing's gonna change. Well, once you know, 2-3 weeks later, the patient's platelets were low. So what did I learn from that? Is that the stools transferred to the patient is really mimicking, right? So we are so far from understanding this, but we need to understand this because there's risk and benefits. And when me, as the doctor, explains to my patients, look, you're going for fecal transplant, I need to be educated with all the risk and benefits, and especially have an open discussion about what we don't know. So without clinical trials, without having done clinical trials for 25 years, as a GI doctor, all these regulations, all these ways of doing research would be completely foreign to me. So it's important to understand research in order to practice as well. There's both sides collaborate really well and have a very good symbiosis, I think.
So a lot of these sites here are thinking, okay, not just how do I get my physician, but then how do I keep them? And a lot of these doctors that I'm talking to have ambitions to do similar things to what you've done. Investigator-initiated trials, maybe they're very passionate about a particular topic. So how can sites help facilitate that? Because I see investigator-initiated trials maybe as a retention tool for the sites to keep their physicians, right? So how do you think they can do that? Because I'm asking for myself.
Well, I think the moment that we don't have physicians' oversight is the moment we've lost medicine, I'll be honest. We need doctors. We need doctors to be the PIs. We need doctors to step back up on the throne and say, this is the way it's done, this is not the way it's done. I think we've scared off a lot of the doctors. I think doctors, because of the current situation with healthcare and the poor reimbursements and the crunches with insurance companies, doctors are trying to figure out solutions to survive. And so they look at clinical trials as an avenue, right? Because it's like, well, I'm getting paid per patient and, you know, I don't have to deal with insurance companies. But then guess what? You deal with the sponsors. And often, you know, we've seen sponsors. There are some great sponsors out there, but there's a lot of sponsors that actually don't pay the study. And so you end up doing the study for free. And so doctors, PIs need to understand that. Also, PIs, doctors need to realize that if they're going into research, it's not a 2-hour job a day. It's 24/7. My life was taken over. I honestly didn't want to go the 90% route of research, and I kind of like always did one study, period. But one study doesn't pay a coordinator that is a good coordinator, right? But I always try to do one, because once you embark on 2, 3, 4 studies, it's 24/7. It's Korea's calling you at 2 o'clock in the morning because some query is not picked up. Now, yes, the coordinator could handle it, but really, you know, PI has to have oversight. So to answer your question, I think the PI needs to be part of the foundation of the clinical trial company. And then when you start hiring doctors to refer, you're getting yourself into a big problem, because then the doctor is getting paid to refer his patients. It might be considered a HIPAA violation there, because now he's giving his patients that are private to him to the pharmaceutical companies. HIPAA violation. These patients come trusting him to keep the records. So it's very, very difficult to embark doctors without them being part of this. If you're going to have a doctor be part of it and referring you patients, the doctor needs to be part of your company and needs to be basically, especially for CRC-owned sites,
Yeah.
I highly recommend hire a doctor to be part of your company, and hire a doctor that's going to, if you have a doctor that's going to be a big referral, then hire that doctor to be the big referral. Make him part of your company to kind of educate the patients to say, look, I have a clinical trial, you may be called by a clinical trial company.
How early do you give equity? Because I know your theory on this is the PI owners make the best PIs, right?
Yeah.
We've had this discussion, but let's say a site is just testing one out, like us right now, with one of our sites, we get the two big objections, how much time am I gonna have to spend? And then I'm scared about the FDA. So they don't want to be an owner yet, you're trying to get them their first study, or maybe to be a sub-I. So what do you do, when is that right moment, and then how do they kind of help? Maybe they want to do IAP, and that's the way the site can get that PI there.
So it's the same thing as hiring a coordinator, by the way. So you give the coordinator, you look at the CV, you look at the resume, you look at the experience, and then you train a coordinator, and you basically say, okay, I'm going to give you one study, and then you observe, you watch how they're doing, how they're performing. Whether you pay a salary to the coordinator or to a doctor, you make them part of your company. I would highly recommend to make the doctor part of your company, because you're going to need that doctor to be hands-on on everything. And if he doesn't have equity, and it probably should be an equal, equity, because it's a teamwork. I believe in teamwork. And I believe in being fair. You need the doctor, he needs you. And then the sponsor needs you and the doctor. So I think you need to find a formula that makes it work for everybody in a more equitable area. I'm not a big person that believes that a business should have a person at the top making billions and then the rest of the people are making nothing. I believe in, a little bit more equal.
Fair enough. What do you think, Chris?
Oh, great.
Use the mic. You have the good mic.
Well, here, you guys can have your talking more.
It's there. Anything else?
No.
PI ownership, site owners, physician recruitment. Oh, I got an interesting email. Somebody got offered, one of our CRA Academy students, got offered a contract job. It could either be the greatest job ever or the worst job ever. Recruiting PIs, and she's going to get 14% of every study budget that PI does. So it's very interesting. We're going to talk with Jeslyn about that, because that's...
It's a formula.
Yeah, so this is big for sites. I was talking earlier to some sites here, you always need to be on the offense when it comes to recruiting more physicians to your practice. Unless you have a real good one, like you, that's your partner, right? But even then, are you guys ever bringing sub-Is to Ventura clinical trials?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of sub-Is.
Yeah?
We have a lot of sub-Is.
But you don't make them owners.
So my sub-Is don't want to have anything to do with research. So they're basically, they're the doctors that work for Kaiser, and they basically don't want to have anything to do with the regulatory. Listen, I have friends of mine that I've said to, I have, as much as I'm the top recruiter in C. diff, there's a couple of friends of mine, Colleen Kelly and Neil Stolman in San Francisco, who have said, why aren't you guys doing clinical trials? And here they're coming to me with, they're basically competition to me. But I want to bring them on because I feel that they can recruit faster, we can get the drug out faster. And they are, the whole paperwork. They don't, they have a problem with coordinators or monitors. It takes away from their GI practice. And at the end of the day, you have to realize as a physician, you have to pick one, right? Do I pick being a GI doctor full-time, or do I pick being a PI full-time? You can still do 10% GI if you're a PI, but if you're full-time GI, it's very difficult, or full-time OB-GYN, it's very difficult to dedicate time for research. So you kind of have to say, okay, well, where do I, pick? Because at the end of the day, your time you cannot get back. And at the end of the day, if you value your time with a dollar sign, then you've lost the boat. But if you value your time as, I want to do better for the world, and I want to do good in the world, then, this is what your life is all about. So I'm a big believer that if you do good, good comes back. That's it.
Yeah, questions?
Dan and Doc.
Yeah.
I'm just, thinking, is there a way to provide a component infrastructure to make the new doctor it less painful and risky for him or her to try? Is there like a little, widget that you could insert into practice? Because then with most be more open, what's the pain? The paperwork, what else is it? Talking, consent? What is the pain and time drain? And is there a little solution? Because I think that would be, a nice way to get people to
Well,
accept.
I think in the olden days, clinical research used to be charts, papers. It was so much easier. Now it's become a lot more complex because EDC entry. So now I, as the doctor, have to look at the chart, make sure my coordinator entered it into the EDC, right? So sponsors will call the doctor last minute, as always, and they'll say, we need the data locked tomorrow. Well, tomorrow I'm in Alaska fishing, and there's no Wi-Fi or computer. There's no way I'm going to be, closing that data lock. On top of that, most sponsors think like the doctor just clicks on a computer, which most doctors probably do just click on a computer. The right way to do it is actually to look at all the charts and make sure that the EDC is complete. More importantly, no,
This is true.
but more importantly,
Doesn't happen.
the AE, the adverse events. So when you budget your time as a physician and you understand the time that it takes to review 66 charts and to make sure all the adverse events are recorded in the EDC, that's not time you're getting paid for. That's not time that, was budgeted in, and that's time that doctors don't have. I will tell you, so there's so many reasons why doctors start off doing clinical trials the first year and then drop. If you look at the overall physician, regardless of the amount of money that's on these budgets, no amount of money is paying for the time that it takes to do proper research. And so physicians need to be understanding that this is what it takes, right? So when you look at, I'll give you an example. I was doing a study with a pharmaceutical company, and we didn't think we were going to have we didn't think we were going to have so many INDs, right? Side effects from the drug. So basically, we were like, okay, well, fine, we don't need to charge for INDs. But even when you do charge for INDs, sometimes it's like, the sponsor puts all these INDs on a computer, expects the PI to log into the computer, which the password drops every month to a new password. My doctor is not going to be like, hi, password, I'm in the Philippines, I can barely hear you, I need a password reset, I need to lock the database, or I need to answer these INDs. So this is all frustration times that doctors don't want to deal with. So, in order to get doctors to first of all, they have to be educated on what they're getting into. Second of all, the budget needs to reflect, or the time of the physician, because I always say, look, if you want me to be involved with this, it's the same time I could be doing 2 colonoscopies. So, I can't be involved in spending 2 hours with a monitor, if at the end of the day, I'm losing funds that pay my practice and survive. So it's a very complex situation, and unfortunately the business is so, the clinical trial world is so many players in it right now that it's gotten too complicated to kind of make it simple. 25 years ago was much simpler than it is now.
Raymond has a question.
Yeah, no, I have building on your question, I have a hypothesis, which is that research is so fundamentally different than care in the workflow. It's very complicated. It's very hard for a doctor to use one-off. So the key to success for most physicians is having a very strong operator, coordinators of experience and no research. And a lot of physicians just keep on, hire someone. So we're seeing the emergence of organizations. They used to be called SMOs, they like to call themselves trial management organizations, whatever. But they are operators who partner with physicians, and they're really ideally targeting health systems so they can get access to all the physicians. And they're going to the pharma company and saying, look, I have a partnership with XYZ health systems. There's 300 GIs. If you're looking for a NASH, I'll find the NASH, and I'll activate that physician, and I will bring you contact, and I'll be the operator. You get that physician's patients, but I will make sure that that physician's successful, even though they're research naive. So we're seeing the emergence of that model, and I think that's the direction that research is going to take.
Yeah, that's the site network.
Yeah, and how successful does that network work? Because I can tell you, I've rescued a lot of farmers. I'm a boutique clinical trial company, so we give in our, budget or whatever, and then they pick these SMOs, and basically they come back to me because they're like, look, we're not recruiting fast enough. We're not recruiting. So it doesn't, again, you're back to square one where you have 300 doctors. It looks great that you have 300 doctors on your panel, but at the end of the day, your trial is not moving. So it's not about hiring the number of doctors. I did a pediatric diabetes study, okay? You want to hear the story? Pediatric diabetes study. It was the hardest study to recruit children where you're given, children can't even get their attention for 5 minutes, let alone stay in your office for 4 hours. So the pharmaceutical company, I told them who to hire as sites. I said, this is who you need to pick as a site. Well, they didn't like the person because the project lead from the or the person that was in charge of the pharmaceutical company's drug had a bad relationship with that person in the past, where they got into this fight or whatever, and then she kept a chip on her shoulder and basically didn't want to hire this person. Then I gave them another person, and they're like, oh well, this person is blacklisted. Yeah, this person is blacklisted because she's probably by the book and you didn't like to hear what she was saying, right? So the good sites are out there that are like efficient, can recruit. The problem is that sponsors, so this pediatric diabetes study, the woman was so stubborn that she didn't want to hire these sites. They hired 300 plus sites all over the world, okay? They invited everybody in Vancouver to improve recruitment 2 years after the study was on, okay? So it didn't matter that and I told them, I go, you can hire 1,000 physicians. You're still going to be at 2 patients that you've recruited in 2 years. Why? Because you hired the wrong people. You need to at the end of the day, you can hire a ballbuster site that's going to do things by the book, or you can hire 3,000, but then you're not moving. So pick your poison. Do you want to move or do you want to not move? I would think as a sponsor or as a CEO of a pharmaceutical company that I would want my drug to be tested fast and get to market fast. And that's the bottom line. So those SMOs are not necessarily, it's again diluting research. We need to go back to basics, to the patient-doctor relationship, to the doctor-sponsor relationship. The best studies that have worked and that have gone to market in 25 years of experience are where I have the sponsor on the phone. And so if the monitor is a problem, I call the sponsor, I'm like, I can't work with this monitor, send me someone else. And guess what?
Careful with that, they'll send someone worse.
Well, then we'll say we can't work with this monitor either. So, at the end, and then guess what? At the end of the day, I can choose to do the study or I can choose not to do the study.
That's right.
When you're a good site And when you do things by the book, you're going to be so overloaded, it's the pick of the litter. I pick whatever I want. I pick studies that I want that are going to be helpful to my patients. I don't pick by the budget. I don't pick by, who the sponsor is or what they can bring me. I pick by, is the sponsor going to work with me? Is the sponsor going to support me? Because I'm going in a chat. This is a risk, a physician taking on a drug. That's a phase 1. It doesn't matter if you get paid $1 million, okay? You are taking a risk of a patient's life on a drug you have no idea what it's all about, and that was tested on mice. Well, last time I checked, the microbiome of the mouse and mine, completely different. The gut of the mouse and mine is completely different. Newsflash, the stomach of the mouse is paralyzed. So how does it reflect? Mine moves properly. So
I think Raymond is right. We'll get to the question right now too. Raymond is right. There is a site network like at DIA, and you want to talk about like a scam. This is virtual trials. So not all virtual trials. There's good ones by the reputable CROs, but kind of related to these. Let's get these big systems. Let's just get all their EMRs and let's do a study. We met some of these companies at DIA. I mean, they're basically paying a site like $1,000 to go get all access to all their EMRs forever. They're installing hardware.
I don't know how they get away with it with HIPAA.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible
I don't
either.
know how they get away with it with HIPAA.
And they're financed by some pretty big CROs too that don't want to do this. But they want to do it, but they don't want to do it.
You can't give EMR information out.
No, it's illegal.
How come there's no one in jail? I don't understand.
Soon.
Okay.
They de-identify the information.
That's what they say. They de-identify, but still those patients should consent to that, right?
Do they do this correctly? Because it's pretty,
Sure.
you'd be surprised how hard it is to de-identify.
No, I understand.
An EMR chart.
Well, to the benefit of these, virtual,
Fake virtual trials.
Yeah, they do, because we saw at DIA, we saw what they were doing. I mean, if I'm a cancer patient and I'm looking for they do bring on the table all the clinical trials. So if I'm a cancer patient and I'm looking for appendiceal cancer and where's the clinical trial sites, they do have ability to do all that. So yes, they're, the HIPAA, and I don't know how they get away with that, truthfully. People call me all the time and say, oh, Dr. Hazan. In fact, even sponsors, I think they think my IQ level is too. But sponsors, not sponsors, but CRs will call me and say, oh, we want to help with your recruitment, and we want to bring in someone that can help go through your database. Nobody touches my database. Nobody touches my database but me. MD doesn't stand for mucho damas, okay?
There's a question. There's a question we'll get to right now. There are most virtual trials are
You may want to
good.
delete that from the video, by the way.
Sure, remember that part.
No, don't delete that. No.
Leave it.
I don't want to go viral.
Yeah, we will. On LinkedIn, we're going to talk about LinkedIn, but yeah, question.
Yes, hi. Thank you for organizing this conference.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I'm a doctor as well. I don't have as much experience in research, but I'm helping to run a company in Los Angeles. And I hear what you're saying about doctors need to be really involved. But the fact of the matter is that there's just not enough doctors out there that are going to be able to full-time be in research. And what we see is that the doctors that have the ability to recruit a lot of patients don't have the time to be PIs. And the doctors that want to do the research because either they want to make money or they want to be involved in research don't have the recruitment ability because they don't have that database. And so our conjecture is that the goal is to figure out a way to streamline this for doctors around the country who want to actually be involved in research, but do it in a way where we can help them with recruitment. But my question is, if you were to take the SMO model, for example, and you were to, with your experience, and you were to say, what can we do to that model to make it more effective? How can we incentivize those doctors to do the research well instead of just saying they need to spend all their time doing it? How would you?
So you have to kind of pick a site or a site that's been doing research for a long time and join and make sure that it's like a PI owned by physicians and kind of make a phone call and say, listen, I want to be part of your network. And as a colleague, collaborating, and that's what I do with my own doctors. You know, we have a ton of doctors that refer to me. And we put them part of the company. So they're part of Ventura Clinical Trials. They don't want to have anything to do with research, but at the end of the day, they're part of my company. I'm sorry?
You give them equity.
Oh yeah, we give them equity because they're part of our company and they have signed, contracts, they know HIPAA, we protect our patients. We coordinate with them to basically get drivers to bring their patients, and we connect with the sponsor, because we understand that you want to stay doing your patients and doing medicine, but that at the same time you don't want to do the research. So it's best to send it to a site that's all they do 24/7, and that's why we created. So I initially created Ventura Clinical Trials just for that. My sister is one of the biggest clinical trial research in Los Angeles. Be glad to hook you up with her. She'd love to talk to you because she does the same formula as I do, where we work with physicians and we give you the feedback, much like if you were to send them to me as a GI doctor to begin with. So, you can create a symbiotic relationship where doctors work together. And I think it is time anyways for doctors to start working together, because we've been so busy competing and separating each other that we've lost a little bit of healthcare, right?
Enrique.
And sadly, we trained for that, right? I mean, nobody's going to replace a gastroenterologist that does colonoscopy and that's trained for after, college, 16 years of training. Nobody's going to train that in 25 years of experience. So you need the doctors. We need the doctors. I am a huge supporter of doctors. I'm a huge believer in physicians doing what they need to do, because part of Progenibiome that I created is I'm actually working with providers that are physicians. I will work with, because I want them to be, it's not a consumer product. I could easily do a stool kit that's a consumer product, like all these other kits out there, but I want to work with the doctors to get the real data. And I want to put the doctors back on the platform, because you guys trained for that. You're the heroes. I don't want to wake up at 70 years old and my doctor is so frustrated that he doesn't come to take care of me in the hospital. We need doctors. We need doctors to be doctors. And so if I can help you, bring in patients and you can get some equity from a trial, being part of my company, so you can keep doing what you love, being a doctor, of course I'm going to do that.
What about doctors that want to be PIs?
Yeah, if they want to be PIs, we train them. So we train them, we overlook everything. And it doesn't have to be my site, by the way. You can pick a bunch of, clinical trial companies that have been, or sites that have been in business for a long time, and make sure that, one, they've not had any 483s with the FDA. So when you ask, those are the questions that I would ask if I'm going in business with someone or partnering with someone, and say, well, how long have you been in business? And have you been audited by the FDA? And have you received the 483? And what was the 483 for? I mean, it could be something benign. But if it's a 483 like, hey, the PI used narcotics and then he drugged some person, I don't want to be in bed with that person personally.
Yeah, I have something to add really quick, and then we'll get to you, Enrique. I know you had a question. My theory, my strategy is to build a platform for the physician, because they all want something else. Like, I've talked to hundreds maybe of physicians now that were seriously considering being PIs. They all want something slightly different, but yet they're all still related to research. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking to me, right? So if you can build the platform, just like Dr. Hazan's done with Ventura Clinical Trials, now she's got her sponsor company, right? Build that platform, I think, is what you should be doing.
And also have the discussions of what you're getting into as a PI. I mean, what does it take? Like, just spend an hour with someone who's been who's been doing it, and kind of understand the expectations. Because, you get into it and then you realize. That's why a lot of physicians actually drop out, is because they realize that they can't do both their practice and research.
Yeah, something like 80% of physicians who do their first trial never do their second trial. Henrique?
My question is this. I read an article that says that of late, because of the competition, most of the doctors are opting to work for the big hospitals.
Yes.
And fewer doctors are now going private. Now in that, some doctors are saying, oh, we are tied to our employer. One of them actually said, if I'm to go out and conduct my clinical trials outside my job will require me to pay them 40% of what I get there. But otherwise it would be, I shouldn't be paid. And then my gratification would be that I'm helping and I can claim the hours through tax. And because of that, my hands are tied. The employers are demanding too much. How do you convince doctors who work for, say, Kaiser Permanente, Johns Hopkins, all those big hospitals to, to do work with you?
So I think most physicians kind of look at me as the outside the box kind of person that will always find a solution. And so a lot of the physicians, get into these jobs where they work for hospitals because it's peace of mind, comfort, etc. I don't believe in competition. I believe that if you do the right thing, patients come to you. I believe that if you have a relationship with a physician, they will send you the patient. And it's all about that. It's all about helping the patient at the end of the day. It's not about the finances. It's not about paying Kaiser doctors. I don't pay any Kaiser doctors for referring patients. They have a respect for me. I have a respect for them. They choose, I have a friend of mine who's a pediatrician, and she works 2 days a week, and that's all she wants to work. She has kids. She doesn't want to get involved more than anything, but she wants to take care of her patients. And so she finds clinical trials as a way to send her patient that she has a difficult time approving the drug. So for example, a lot of patients, Crohn's patients especially, have a hard time paying for their biologics, right? So the physician who's only there 2 days a week working for Kaiser or for a big hospital does not have time to be on top of the authorization to approve the biologic. So the patient falls through the cracks. So the patient has two choices. They can pay cash to see a private physician and then pay cash for their medications, or they can enter a clinical trial that gives them the biologic. For the physician that's in a hospital setting, it's a win-win situation for them because their patient is being taken care of, their patient's getting the drugs, and they can have the free time to be with their kids. So again, it's a collaboration. It's not about finance. It's about taking care of the patient. And at the end of the day, how do I get patients? I've been in business for 25 years as both a GI doctor, a researcher. I started off at University of Florida in my fellowship as a GI doctor doing clinical research. And I realized the problems with clinical research in a big hospital back then. And the problems are the coordinators change. Every 3 months you have a different coordinator. The paperwork to get an approval, let's say a sponsor decides, we're going to change the age group for that trial from 16 years old to 25 years old. All of a sudden you need to get an amendment. The amendment needs to go through the IRB. Well, the hospital doesn't meet for 3 months. So now you're stuck with a protocol that you took on. You have the sponsor saying, Dr. Hazan, you told us you were taking the study and we're still not recruiting. And you get phone calls. I mean, this is why, to the physician that asked the question, this is why this is a 24/7. People call you nonstop. You have medical directors that are on the sponsor side that are a doctor like me that is like, Sabine, where's the patient, right? So in an academic center, it's not always easy to do clinical research. So, so these doctors have no problem in sending those patients if there's no trial in their center.
Yeah, and this is something we dealt with actually. We had firsthand experience. To answer your question with the large health systems, how do you work with them? You don't. That seems to be the best solution because you're wasting time unless you're desperate for a PI, but you know that you're just going to get a name. You're not going to get any patients. You're just going to get a name, and hopefully they come to your site when they need to provide oversight. Unlikely, right? Hopefully they come meet with monitors at least.
Most of those positions are sending on feeds though.
Yes, and what happens when the big groups like Dignity Health come in, right? Because they have these health systems, and now they're doing research. So, you know, maybe you're going to teach one of these health systems about research, and then they're going to cut you out. It's happened to me, actually, in Bakersfield with Dignity Health. So, best avoid that. Like, go somewhere else. Mom and pop is best.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was going to say is, you know, these patients come in for a trial. You gotta be convincing yourself that this is the right drug for them, right? So I will never take on a drug if I didn't look at the investigator brochure of the product to look at whether the method was thought of properly. I've had companies come to me and very attractive budgets, but the drug was not something I would give my cat. So, you know, if I'm not going to give my cat, I'm not going to sell the drug, period. I'm not going to sell it to the patient, right? I mean, at the end of the day, again, it's a risk. Where am I switching?
Yeah, let's use this.
At the end of the day, it's a risk, and you're taking on the risk with this new drug. So you got to make sure that this is your train of thought, and that, you know, I think about what I do for a living. I'm a gastroenterologist that does colonoscopies. I've done colonoscopies for 25 years, probably over 20,000 colonoscopies. I would never be able to sell a colonoscope, which is essentially a tube 120 centimeters up somebody's rectum, if I didn't believe in a colonoscopy, right? I believe in what I do. I've had my own colonoscopy, so I can sell that. If a drug is not where it's at, and the doctor, the PI, is not convinced this is the right approach, you're never going to move this drug off the pipeline of research. And so, first you have to convince the doctor that's undergoing the research as a sponsor. Your sponsor, or I don't know what you...
No, you own the site.
Okay, so you own the site.
Yeah.
So first you have to convince the doctor that this is the right drug to take on.
And what do you think about nurse practitioners? I think
mean,
that's
yeah,
the secret, actually. Like, that's the bridge for this thing is nurse practitioners, very underutilized. Here in California, they can see patients, so I'm sure in other states they can too. I think here they actually have to have a doctor supervising them. In other states, sometimes they're independent. So I think that's the key. Now, they usually can't be PIs, but they can provide the medical oversight that the PI may not be able to provide until you can find a better PI. That's my strategy.
But then your expense goes up.
Yeah, then your expense goes up too. Or if you want to give equity, I mean, you know, we've been through this several times. So we just see the same thing happening over and over and over again. We're about to get tacos very soon. So we're going to break for lunch. But before we go, two things for you, because I know you got to go. So let's talk first about, well, we're going to end with Progenibiome, how sites can join your study if they want to. So I'll give you time to meet with people right now. But LinkedIn, how important is LinkedIn for you and Facebook? You're able to find sites for your studies on LinkedIn? Or was it
I don't
Facebook?
know about LinkedIn sites. I mean, I'm Facebook, I'm on Facebook, I mean, I'm on you know, a lot of groups. But I don't recruit from Facebook. You know, I think I'm actually not even Dr. Hazan on Facebook. I'm kind of anonymous and private.
Yeah.
But
on
I,
LinkedIn you are.
no, LinkedIn, I'm out there, and I think, you know, I bring on, I mean, I've done a couple of your podcasts. I follow a lot of the things that goes on. Yeah, I believe it's a good network for networking and meeting people, and definitely I've met a lot of different project leads, monitors, coordinators, and it's kind of, you know, word to mouth after that.
then, Chris, anything else? Any questions?
No,
Progenobiome. So let's do the call to action now before lunch. Okay. As much as you can provide, and then what do they do?
Well, basically, Progenobiome, we're trying to understand the microbiome. So we have a protocol that is on the clinicaltrials.gov. We are essentially consenting patients to undergo an analysis of their stools, and we categorize them by diseases, so we can understand the microbiome a little bit better from race and culture. And so, as many doctors, sites that want to be part of this, please let me know. We're always looking for collaboration and participation. We're not sponsored by venture capitalists or anything like that. It's really my own investment towards understanding life, really. And that's more important to me than the finances or the fame or anything, because I think we're in this planet for a short time. It would be important to know where we're going after we die, I think.
And as an added bonus, any sites that join Progenobiome's network of sites, you're building a huge website where you're going to have a map of sites all over the world.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the microbiome has a lot of PR right now. You know, everybody knows about the microbiome. So because we want to keep it as a physician being the providers and as sites collaborations, we're putting you guys on the website, so you're going to be directly the person of contact if patients want to understand and analyze their microbiome, because it's essentially, I'm doing the biggest clinical trial. You know, that's going to be interesting. So, and I'll talk about the details of how to participate, but essentially it's pretty straightforward. We give a kit to the patients where they give us their stools. We give you a consent. You just have to sign the consent. Make sure that the patient signs the consent properly, and then we essentially give you, you know, the whole protocol of what we're doing. We keep you in the loop of what's going on in the microbiome, so you're going to be on the cutting edge of medicine.
Yeah, thank you. So, question.
Yeah, are you looking for local sites with PI or just for recruiting patients?
No, I'm basically looking for, because it's a global study, we're going to go global. So we're basically structuring all that presently. So right now, you know, we haven't gotten all the fine details of everything and how it's going to work out, but we're taking names and we're doing NDAs with you guys at the beginning, so we can kind of like incorporate you, so when we're ready to kind of say, okay, we're launching this trial, we have everybody on board and we're ready to launch. But my goal with the microbiome is basically to do it as a clinical trial rather than a consumer product, because this is something that the patients need to understand. This is genetic testing of the stools. Their identity is private. We're not 23andMe. Even though we're doing 23andMe of the gut, we are not 23andMe. We're not selling their data to pharmaceutical companies. It's all private. It's all deciphered. The names are hidden and everything. We count on the physicians and the sites when they do send us the stools to send us the H&B, so we can stratify the patient properly. But when we're ready for all that, we'll be explaining and how to get you involved and all that. So right now we're just taking the names of whoever wants to participate. And this is good, you know, public relation for you in a way, because you'll be part of a big website that's going to be hopefully, you know, bringing on all the doctors from all over the world and all the sites from all over the world to kind of like see the microbiome together.
So if anyone wants to sign up, you'll be here, right, for a little bit?
And I'm going to give I'll pass my cards.
Yeah, and then if you have a card, give it to Dr. Hazan. She's built a platform. We're going to break right now. We're going to have a little mixer before lunch, and then we'll eat, and then we'll come back and stay till 5 or 6.
And one of the other advantages, we're going to be working with pharmaceutical companies to do their stool genetic studies. So in other words, whenever they have a product and they want to test, they're going to be using our lab. We already have a couple, probably about 3 pharmaceutical companies. So your name being part of us, collaboration, is almost like a site network, because people will look and say, oh, well, Sabine has a relationship with these doctors, let's send these sites the rheumatoid arthritis study, I'm always available 24/7, so, you know, if you ever have questions on, hey, I have the FDA in my office, hey, I have this, you know, I have questions about like regulatory, or this happened to me, you know, I'm always available to help out and guide you better to not be getting a 483, or at least to do things the right way.
Yeah, you built the platform, so now you're able to have other sites. And this is great for research naive physicians too.
Yes, absolutely.
Oftentimes when a site they finally got their first PI that said yes, can do a study, but now the problem is we don't have experience. So this is a good way to ease into these kind of studies. Yeah, so we'll break. You'll meet with people now. We'll do a little mixer. People are going to network, and then we're going to eat, and then we'll come back and have more panels. But thank you very much, Dr. Hazan.
Okay.